Welcome everyone to this quick start video getting started with AgnosticD. We're going to go through 2 or 3 steps just to get you into a situation where you can start deploying using AgnosticD locally from your laptop, from a server. Okay, so let's get started. First, what we're going to need is the URL of the repo. It's over on GitHub. It's part of the Red Hat community of practice. That's redhat-cop, and it's AgnosticD, AGNOSTICD. When we switch to my terminal, you'll see the URL. We copy that, and then let's go over to our client machine. So what I've done here is I've spun up a Red Hat image on AWS, could be 7.5, 7.6, I haven't actually checked that. You can see the URL for your repo, top right hand corner, and what we're going to do is we're going to clone the repo and we're going to do our first deploy. So let's just check. We've got a couple of dependencies that we need. We need Git. Git's already installed. Obviously we're going to need Ansible. Ansible's already installed. You all know the drill. If you don't find either, it's yum install Git and it's yum install Ansible. So now we need to clone the repo. Shouldn't take too long, it's not huge. Okay, there we are, and there it is, AgnosticD. So let's cd into there and let's have a quick look around. So there's the Ansible directory. Let's make this a little bit bigger, and let's cd into the Ansible directory, and in there we should find the configs. Okay, so and into the configs, and today we're going to choose a very simple config. We're going to use 3-tier app. So inside 3-tier app, fortunately we have what's called a sample vars file, and the easiest way to deploy with AgnosticD is basically to launch the main playbook with your version of the sample vars file. Now typically you are going to need some secrets, some credentials, and we'll talk about those in a moment. The one exception to this is when you're working with OpenShift workloads and you're deploying a workload onto an existing environment, but we'll leave that for another day. So let's go into 3-tier app, and there you see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy sample vars into my home directory. Okay, and I'm going to cd out of there and back into my root directory. Okay, let's clear the screen, give ourselves a working area. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger again, and let's have a look at sample vars. Okay, so the way AgnosticD works is the configs have default variables and they're pretty much ready to go. So in the case of 3-tier app, if we just apply a couple of sample vars to it, we'll successfully deploy with our credentials on a domain that we have read-write access to. So let's have a look at what we need to modify. So first we have the environment type. The environment type is in this case 3-tier app, and this is actually how AgnosticD knows what to deploy. The output directory for us is /temp workday. This is a working space where we'll actually create a clone of AgnosticD. We'll create our working scratch space. We're going to ignore email just now, but the next field, GUID, is important. This is basically going to be your final subdomain. So we're going to call it demo AgnosticD. Now call it what you want, but it has to be a legal DNS subdomain name. Now the next field is basically going to give us our domain. So in this case, the credentials I'm going to use are going to allow me to deploy to example.opentlc.com. So if you're using your own credentials or you're using what we call sandbox credentials, then what you have to put here is a subdomain that you can deploy to. The final variable that you need to care about here is the repo path. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to split the file in two. We're going to have these publicly shareable variables, and you would put your own repo path and your AWS credentials into a secret var file, secrets.yml, etc. You could encrypt it with Ansible Vault, and then you will pass both of those to Ansible Playbook when you invoke the deployment. We'll do that in a moment. Other than that, as you look down, you do have the ability to potentially change your cloud provider, in which case, in this case, this config is supported in Azure, but we're going to assume you want to deploy to AWS. It is the easiest, it's the best supported for us. Choose your region, your HostedZoneId, that is yours. It will be associated with your domain and what you are able to write to. So you can't use the one you see here with your own domain. And the key name. So here what we're doing is, this is a key that has already been created. So if you don't have a key, you should log on to the AWS console and you can create a key. Or if your Ansible's good, you can create a key with Ansible. Okay, so that's your sample vars file. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the secrets. Okay, next step, so the secret vars. So what I've actually done is I've actually prepared two files. I prepared secrets, which are my credentials, and I prepared fake secrets. So let's have a look at our fake secrets. Okay, so what you're going to need is Amazon credentials. So either you can use your existing account, or you can set up your own account from scratch. It is actually quite straightforward to set up an account on AWS. They will give you a certain amount of credit. The sort of configurations that the sample vars and the environmental vars will deploy by default will actually start to cost you real money, either straight away or very, very soon. So be aware of that. You could actually modify them onto smaller instances, but almost certainly there is going to be a cost involved. The other way you can do this if you're a Red Hat employee is to use the sandbox accounts, which I'm not going to cover today. What I do want to cover is just getting AgnosticD deploying. So there you put your key in there, you put your secret access key in there, and also you need to point to a yum repository which your environment can build off. So these are your three confidential pieces of information. So we'll quit there. Okay, so now let's get those final dependencies in place and start our deploy. So typically you should have Python installed on your Linux system. Same goes for your Mac. If you don't, then this is a command you're going to need: sudo yum install python, and you're also going to need python pip. Now I'm going to use pip here to install a couple of dependencies that we have. What I always say is, if you're working with customers in a supported environment, install as much as you can with yum and use pip as your fallback. If you're doing a lot of Ansible development on your laptop and you're working with different versions of Ansible and you're using complex dependencies, perhaps working with networking devices and hypervisors, etc., then I strongly recommend pip for its flexibility and the ability to support virtual environments very well. So I'm just going to run this to see whether it's installed. Both are installed, and now we're going to do pip. So I'm not running in a virtual environment, so I am going to have to run this as root. Again, if you do a lot of development, I recommend virtual environments. So I'm going to go sudo pip install, and the first thing I want to install is Boto 3. This allows Ansible to find the AWS API endpoints and communicate with them. So it enables the modules to do their work. And the second thing is AWS CLI, which is used under the covers by AgnosticD. So let's install those now. So Better was already there, and we've now installed the AWS CLI. Next step is to cd into AgnosticD. We actually want to be in the Ansible subdirectory, which is where the main playbook is. So let's do a quick ls, and there you can see it. Actually, we do have one more prerequisite. So some of you may not have this. If all your SSH keys are set up and you use Amazon frequently, you will have the necessary SSH key in the necessary place. But if you remember, let's just grep key out of our sample vars file. We have this line here. Okay. OCP key. Key name is OCP key. Ansible, when it executes the AgnosticD playbook, it will expect to find that credential in your .ssh directory. So let's have a quick look at that. ls-r tilde.ssh, and indeed there it is. You can see the OCP key PEM there. Now if it isn't there, it will fail. Now if you're working on a machine you just spun up in the cloud, you need to transfer your key over to there. And one thing I will say is make sure that you set the permissions correctly. SSH can be quite sensitive, or is quite sensitive to that. I see some people give it read-write permissions or 0600. I tend to give it 0400, just force of habit. It's arguably more secure. You're less likely to overwrite it, but you will need that key there. Without it, the playbook will fail, and it will not be apparent the nature of this failure. You will see it sitting there timing out as it tries to do its first task, where it's actually manipulating or configuring the instances after it's brought them up. So the first task will run fine. The ones which are going to Amazon say, give me a virtual private cloud, give me a subnet, etc. Give me these instances, or which we do with CloudFormations. But when we actually start to configure the instances, what is happening is Ansible is using this key to actually move the Python tasks onto the nodes themselves. Okay, so we're going to launch main.yml with our two var files. So Ansible playbook, main.yml -e at. Now I'm going to put a space in here. Now we're going to come back to that. So first I need my sample vars, and I'm going to go -e at space again tilde and my secret vars. I'm going to get rid of those spaces. If you don't use this pattern a lot, just like you can pass variables to Ansible with -e guid equals 1 2 3 4, you can pass whole var files to it with -c space at and file name. No space between the at and the file name. That was just for the completion. And the rightmost wins. If you pass 3 variable files and they all contain the same variable, the last or rightmost file will win. Remove that. Okay, so now we have it. Ansible playbook, main.yml, our 2 variable files, and hopefully we're ready for our first deploy. Let's try that. And it's still too early. And it's off, and I'm not going to keep you here for the 5 or 10 minutes it takes. We'll come back in a moment when this has hopefully successfully completed. And there we have it, the successful completion of our first deploy. It took 2 minutes 55 seconds. Your mileage might vary. I'm actually running on a machine on AWS, and you will see noticeably faster deployment times. If you're running on your laptop, I often deploy it from my laptop, 5 to 10 minutes depending on your connection. So there is your first deploy, and the pattern repeats across all of the configs. We set up the sample vars, we present our credentials, we present any other data we need like repo paths, and then we invoke Ansible playbook main.yml with one or more variable files to get the desired result. Thank you. I hope this has been helpful.